pleasure to be on this broadcast with you. I think we need young people to step up and to be activists and to be warriors for freedom and liberty and free enterprise. That's what's at stake here. I really believe that the decisions that we make as a nation and in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals and at the local level, the political decisions we make and policy decisions will have a profound impact on the American economy and our society over the next 10 years. And I'm not being overly dramatic. This is a big moment for our country. We need to make sure that we band together for the principles and the policies that we know work. So what do we need to do going forward? There's 3 or 4 things that are essential. Number one, first and foremost, we have to get this economy up and running as quickly and swiftly and safely as possible. We can do this. We should have done it weeks ago. There are over half of the counties in the United States have virtually no coronavirus cases. Those places should be up and running. They should have been up and running a long time ago. This virus like this is an urban disease. There are 12 or 13 metropolitan areas that have been very negatively affected by coronavirus. Most of the rest of the country, not so much. And incidentally, just so you don't think I'm being cold-hearted here or anything like that, I have 3 very good friends who contracted coronavirus. One came very close to dying from it. The other 2 got really, really sick for 2 weeks, and it was a horrid experience. So I do know how deadly this virus can be. But that did not justify putting 25 to 30 million Americans in the unemployment line. It does not justify millions of American businesses failing. It does not justify plunging millions of families below the poverty line. It doesn't justify what we're seeing with respect to health problems, everything from increase in suicides to isolation to depression to increasing numbers of child abuse cases, spousal abuse. All of these things are a repercussion of a decision to isolate people for 6, in some cases 8 weeks. And by the way, I live right outside of Virginia. Virginia, the governor there wants to keep the U.S. economy, not the U.S. economy, the Commonwealth of Virginia shut down until June 10th. That is crazy. That is insane. If you keep that economy shut down for another 6 weeks, you're not going to have an economy to rebuild. A very dangerous idea. So we can do it in a safe way to start reopening our economy, get commerce flowing again, get people back to work. Now, as a free market person, a conservative, everybody on this call and on this broadcast is a conservative, or else you wouldn't be on this. We cannot surrender the moral high ground here. When we say open the economy, they say you're trying to kill people. That's nonsense. We're very arguably at this point killing more people by keeping the economy shut down than allowing it to open in a safe way. It is ridiculous. If they want to defend putting 30 million, it could be 40 million Americans in unemployment and putting people into poverty and destroying people's life's work when they start a business and they have to fail. These costs are so enormous, and it's going to be for a long time, folks. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, when this is over in 2 or 3 weeks, we can all go outside again and everything's going to be like normal. No, it's not. I wish it were, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but when a business fails, it's not like Lazarus. It can't resurrect itself. That business is gone forever. The assets are sold. There's nothing to resurrect. And that is a heartbreaking thing to see. These are not, and by the way, there was The Atlantic magazine had this disgusting column today about how Republican governors who are opening up their economy are trying to kill their own people. That is a disgusting and vile thing to say. This is outrageous, and we can't allow the left to get away with that. We are going to do this in a very safe and effective way. If some areas need to be shut down, obviously we need to keep nursing homes shut down because, isolated and quarantined, because as you know, most of the deaths are in nursing homes. We need to keep people who have various chronic diseases and pre-existing conditions. We need to keep them safe. We're the ones who believe in safe in life, not them. We also know that people who are overweight and have other health problems are more susceptible to this disease. Those are the people we need to keep safe. We are seeing right now, by the way, red states opening up. So some of the heroes right now are Ron DeSantis of Florida, Governor Kemp of Georgia, The governor of South Carolina, his name escapes me right now. The governor of Utah has been fantastic. The governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, has done a fantastic job. The Nebraska governor, Governor Ricketts, has been outstanding. What you're going to see going forward is red states are going to open up. Republican governors want to get their economies moving again and get people back to work so that we don't suffer massive deprivation. And those governors deserve to be praised for what they're doing, not ridiculed and saying they're trying to kill people. They're trying to save families from severe deprivation and poverty and unemployment. So that's really good news. The blue states are not opening up, and we need to shame those blue governors and those blue state mayors who are saying we're not going to open up our economies. They're the ones that are causing the crisis in America. They're the ones who are prolonging the misery that we have imposed on so many American families. And by the way, when liberals try to claim this high ground as saying how much they care about people, the people who are being destroyed, whose lives are being just crushed and flattened by this shutdown of the economy, are the poorest among us, the people who don't have savings in the bank, who live paycheck to paycheck, middle class folks, working class Americans who cannot go 6-8 weeks without a paycheck, and they have to cut back dramatically on their expenditures if they do. These are the people you see now in the food lines at the Salvation Army trucks, and that is heartbreaking to see in some states. I mean, some cities like Pittsburgh, the line to get food from the soup kitchens is a mile long. That's what the left has done to us because of this terrible decision to not be smart about opening up the economy. You do it selective ways. You use the best health practices. You use gloves. You use obviously masks. You use social distancing in the workplace and in restaurants and in public places. You do disinfectants. We now looks like we're going to have some treatments coming online. You test people, but you do all those things in conjunction with getting Americans back to work. We have a $20 trillion industrial economy. We have the engine of growth, not just in the United States, but for the rest of the world. When we destroy our economy, the rest of the world is destroyed too. Again, people take the moral high ground here. What about the damage this is doing to villages in Africa? What about in places like South America? What about all over the world? As our economy shrinks, theirs necessarily has to as well. So we need to praise red state governors who are opening up, and we need to really attack the governors like Governor Cuomo and like Governor Newsom and this Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania and others who want to keep the economy shut down for weeks and weeks, if not months to go. Our analysis shows, by the way, I did a study with Arthur Laffer that's out right now. If you go to lafferassociates.com, you can find that study, and it shows that the red states that are opening up are going to have a big advantage going forward. They are going to grow much faster than the blue states that stay shut down. You're going to see more and more businesses leave the blue states like New Jersey and Connecticut and Illinois, and they're going to move to states like Arizona and Florida and Texas and Tennessee that are opened up. That's going to put the pressure on the blue states to open. Next, no more spending. Stop the spending. No more federal spending. We've already spent over $3 trillion. That's 3 trillion with a T. These are ungodly numbers that I never expected in my lifetime to see. $3 trillion. And many mistakes have been made. The business loan program, in my opinion, isn't working very well. It should have been a loan program, not a grant program. We are now paying workers in many states. I think 31 states, workers are being paid more to stay home than go back on the job. That is lunatic. That is a prescription for economic disaster. We're not going to get workers back on the job, even if businesses open up, if they can get more money by staying unemployed than going back on the job. So we need to stop the spending. Government does not create jobs. This is not a stimulus when the government spends money. The government can only spend money, and I know most of you have had basic economics, you understand this. It's just the PhD economists in Washington who don't understand this. When the government spends money, it can only take money by taking it from productive people and productive businesses. It's all just income redistribution from the most productive people to the people who are the least productive in the economy, or to the government sector, which isn't very productive at all. So we got to stop spending now. And most importantly, in terms of the spending, there should be no bailout of the states. The federal government can't The federal government doesn't have some kind of pot of money that somehow it can just give out to states. The only way the federal government can give money the only way the federal government can spend resources is by taking those resources from the states in the first place, right? So this is just some kind of an illusion that somehow the federal government's going to just pass out all this money. It's only passing out money that it stole from the states in the first place. So no bailout, especially no bailout of the blue states and their pensions. You know, you look at these states like Tennessee and Texas and Utah, they spend half as much per person on state and local government as does New York or New Jersey. And they, by the way, these red states like Tennessee and Texas and Utah have better public services than the states that spend twice as much. So we should force those blue states. There's an old saying, you made your bed, you sleep in it. The great thing about federalism in America is that if people in California, New York, New Jersey want big government, they can have at it, right? They can do it, and their citizens and the voters in those states, if they want to vote for that, fine. That's what America's about, you know, letting people have the government they want. But there is absolutely zero justification of people in Tennessee and Texas and Utah and Nebraska and Idaho to have to pay more in federal taxes to bail out these big spending states. They have to, deal with their own problems. Next, we need a payroll tax cut. So we need to suspend the payroll tax for the rest of the year for every one of the 160 million workers in this country and for every one of the 30 million small businesses in this country. What you are doing is giving every single worker, including the minimum wage worker, the waitress or waiter, the person who works as a construction worker, or the person who works, as a home care worker, they are going to get a 7.5% increase in their paycheck because that money, that tax will not be withheld from their paycheck. That's gigantic. That's hugely beneficial. And at the same time, businesses will see a 7.5% reduction in their payroll costs. That will incentivize businesses to hire more workers because it's cost them less in terms of the tax to hire workers. There's an old saying in economics, and economics is not complicated. When you tax something, you get less of it. When you tax something less, you get more of it. By reducing the tax on working, you'll get more work. And by reducing the tax on employing people, you'll get more employment. And that's what we need. We need to get Americans back to work as quickly as possible. The next principle is one I just talked about, federalism, and Donald Trump has been excellent on this. This is the idea of letting the states take the lead. This is the ingeniousness of our federal system. No other country in the world has this. The federal government was created by the states. The federal government didn't create the states. So we ought to let the states and governors make the decisions, and we're seeing what the repercussions of that. Red states are moving ahead. They're going to have a much more robust expansion than blue states that are dragging their heels. The next principle that I think is very important, and maybe I'll end on this, and then I'd love to take questions from folks. I am very, very concerned as a libertarian, and I'm pretty I'm kind of conservative / libertarians, but I don't like big government. I don't like government telling me what to do. I believe that the purpose of government is to protect people's life and property and to have various rules that protect us. But I don't think the government should be telling us what to do. And certainly the government's responsibility, in my opinion, is not to protect me from myself. I don't want the government deciding what I can do. I want to make those decisions myself. Whether it's now what we're seeing right now is a repercussion of this coronavirus and these extraordinary power grabs that are being taken by, I would say, the federal government, the state governments, and the mayors and the governors. They are taking away our rights at an incredibly dangerous pace. I live in Maryland, where you can't go out. They're chaining up the tennis courts and the playgrounds, and people can't get out. They've got curfews. They got people snitching on their neighbors. We saw the violations of religious rights, especially on Easter Sunday, when people wanted to go to church services. They were social distancing themselves from other people, so they were doing everything right from a public health perspective, and the police came in and shut down those religious services. That is outrageous. That's not America. That's Russia. That's the Soviet Union. We have to stand up for our rights. I've been very much involved in many of these, with some of these protesters that are protesting both their right to make a living. And by the way, that should be your right in the United States, that you have a right to make a living and you have a right to start a business. And the government doesn't have a right to shut your business down if you're not doing anything illegal. Those rights have been taken away. But First Amendment rights to protest. These protesters, whether you agree with them or not, and I find myself in sympathy what they're talking about, give us back our freedoms, give us back our rights, give us back our economy that created the most wealthy society in the history of the planet. But the left believes that they can just shut these down. These are the same people who, when we had the Vietnam War protests or civil rights, which I'm very much in favor of, that they are expressed. You have a right in America to take your grievances to the streets, and and civil disobedience is really part of an American culture. It really goes back to the roots of this country. So I'm very worried about First Amendment rights of free speech. I'm worried about rights of religion. I'm worried about the right of assembly. All of these things are being under assault. And your generation, because most of you listening to this are young people, you have to step up. You have to step up. My parents were part of the greatest generation, the generation that went through the Great Depression, and then, of course, fought World War II and beat the Nazis. And we lost 600,000 lives of young people in World War II. These people fought for our liberties. And then, of course, they rebuilt the American economy after World War II. And we've had for the most part, a very, very, very strong economy. They built America into the economic powerhouse of the world. Sometimes I worry about that when I see young people saying they put safety and security over freedom. Never do that. Never do that. Freedom and liberty is what it's about. It's the reason so many people around the world want to come to this country. They want to come for economic opportunity, freedom, and liberty. And there's no other place in the world that has it. Let's not give that away. We should be willing to give up our fortunes, our lives, and our sacred honor, as our forefathers said, to protect the freedoms of this country. They are under assault right now, and we cannot let them succeed. I believe that this is going to be one of the most important elections ever in this country coming up in November. I believe that if, God forbid, Joe Biden is elected president, we are going to see a massive lurch towards statism, not socialism, statism, where the government tells you what you can do. It takes away your rights as individuals. It imposes very high taxes on people and destroys businesses and opportunity in this country. Let's not let that happen. I'm going to stop there. Thanks again to the Leadership Institute for hosting me, and eager to hear your questions.
All right, Mr. Moore, thank you for that wonderful insight. I know our audience learned a lot from that. So I want to remind everyone again, please use the question and answer function in Zoom to pose your questions. So starting out first, we have a question from Caleb Salinas at Texas State University. He is part of the Young Americans for Liberty group there. So his question is about the state of the American economy in light of the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Moore, with the current state of the world, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty of whether or not we can recover from this. Is this a legitimate concern, and what can Americans do proactively to get through this time when it is so easy to look at the situation as hopeless?
It's not hopeless. It's not hopeless. I mean, it's going to be a rough summer. We've done a lot of damage to our economy. It's not, this free market system is not, it's in the businesses. You can't just turn them off for 2 months and then like switching an ignition switch on a car and think that it's going to start right up. We've done severe damage. So it's a good question. And hopefully we will never do this again. We'll never shut down the engines of growth in this country. You can't have a society without an economy. And I do want to protect people. I do value human life. We all as conservatives believe that every life matters and that life begins with conception and ends with natural death. So I am pro-life, as most of you, I think, on this call are probably pro-life, but you can't have a society without an economy, right? If you shut down production, you run out of services, you have deprivation, you have poverty, you have despair. So we need to keep the free enterprise system up and running, and we got to get it up and running as quickly as possible. I believe that by the end of the summer, we could start to see a light at the end of this tunnel. I think hopefully by the fall, we start to see some return to normalcy. I sure hope so, because the fact is that if we go into the fall, not only it was a prolonged recession, really bad for every American. It leads to a dramatic reduction in our living standards and real financial hardship for people. But look, I think that if we go into recession in the fall and the American people elect Joe Biden, assuming Joe Biden is the Democratic candidate as president, it doesn't matter because unfortunately the Democratic Party has moved so far to the radical left. It doesn't matter which one of these guys, whether it's Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Michelle Obama or whoever they might choose. This is a party that is dominated today by leftists. When I came to Washington 30 years ago, that was not the case. There were a lot of very level-headed Democrats. In fact, in a lot of cases, Democrats were more level-headed than Republicans. And I'm not a rah-rah Republican by any means. I'm mad at the Republicans for what they did. They voted for this crappy bill 3 weeks ago that we're paying such a high price for. But if we were to have a great, if Joe Biden won the election in a recession and the Democrats came in and did the things they say they want to do, the Green New Deal, raise taxes to 50 or 60%, have a wealth tax, have the government take over our healthcare system, guaranteed national income, destroy our military. I mean, you know everything that they want to do. If they do that, we will have a Great Depression. We will have a decade of severe deprivation in this country where people are going to have a hard time putting food on their table. That's how bad it could get. Those are the stakes here. I think Trump is going to win. I think the American people see the incredible job that he's done. Don't forget, 2 months ago, we had the best economy in 40 years. I was proud to play a very small part in that with the tax cuts, the deregulation, the better improved trade deals. And so those are the stakes here.
Well, I think our next question asks more about that in the market. It's a video question from Nate Dunning from the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor. So Nate, take it away.
Hey, I'm Nate Dunning from the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor. I'm the chapter chair for Young Conservatives of Texas, and I'm the treasurer for the McLean College of Business Investment Club. So my question is, with states like Texas beginning to open up, how quickly can we expect markets to return to their pre-COVID-19 levels?
You mean financial markets?
Yes.
Financial markets, yeah. The market has really rallied a lot in the last month, really rallied. I mean, the Dow was fell below 19,000, I believe. I think it might have gotten closer to, I forget the low point, but let's say it was 19,000. I think it was slightly lower than that. The Dow is now at 24,400 or something like that. So, it's rallied a lot. It was at 30,000. It fell like a stone down to 19. Now it's back up to 24,500. The Dow rallied today big time because it looks like one of these new drugs might be, I don't know a lot about it, but it looks like we might have an effective treatment for coronavirus. Let's pray that happens, because if that happens, even if we had a second recurrence of the virus, we would have treatments and people could remain healthy even if they contracted the virus. By the way, most young people, most of you listening to the show, you're probably in your late teens, early 20s. The very, 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 very few people have gotten really sick your age. It's really an old person's disease. And that's not that there are some exceptions, and maybe some of you know people your age who've gotten pretty sick, but not that many. So I think that we're going to see. I think it's been a while. I think it's going to be a while before we get to where we were back in February when we had Dow 29,000. I think you're going to see fits and starts. I don't know if I'd be buying stocks today, frankly, because I'm a little worried about the market being a little overly enthusiastic and overly optimistic about how long it's going to take to recover from this. I think a lot of investors think once people get back up and running, it's just going to be like a smooth running machine. I'm a little skeptical of that. Especially if we get these blue states staying shut down for another few months. I mean, think about New York City. I mean, New York City is a major part of our economy. California is a major part. If those states are shut down for another couple of months, those two states alone account for 20 to 25% of our economy. So we need to get everybody up and running. I do think I'm somewhat of an optimist, but right now my advice for investors out there is hold on to your stocks for sure. Because you don't want to sell them right now. If you're going to sell them, you should have sold them a month and a half ago. But I wouldn't rush into this market right now either. I'm a little worried about it. I think you're going to see, some ups and downs in this market for the foreseeable future.
All right, Nate, thank you for your question. Up next is a question from Alex Philippos from the question and answer chat box. Is there anything that can be done with the inflation that will follow from all of this pumping from the Federal Reserve?
So this is an interesting question because right now what we have, this may surprise some of you, and there's a lot of disagreement among economists about this. I'm of the belief that we are facing a severe deflation. Prices are falling now, they're not rising. Now, that may not be the case 6 months or a year from now, right? Because we have pumped a lot of money into this economy. But even with all of the money that's being pumped into this economy by the Federal Reserve Board, prices are falling. Just look at the oil price. Anybody from Texas or Oklahoma or North Dakota or Pennsylvania, Ohio knows what I'm talking about. I mean, the oil price fell to below $5 a barrel. It was at $50 a barrel. It fell to below $5 a barrel. It's now back up to $20 a barrel, but that's significantly below where it was pre-coronavirus. You're seeing anytime you have a crisis like this that's international in scope, whether it's a terrorist incident, whether it's the outbreak of a war, whether it's an assassination, whether it's a major hurricane or weather event or something like a coronavirus, when people get fearful, they buy two things. There's two things that people buy when they're afraid. You know what those are. Number one, gold. Gold is the last refuge of the cowards. When people are afraid and they think the world's blowing up, you buy gold. The gold is a hedge against the end of the world. But the second thing people are buying, even of greater holding in massive amounts right now, is dollars. There's a run on the dollar right now. Everybody wants to own dollars because it may not be the greatest currency, but you know what? It's the least rotten apple in the cart. And so you're getting a mad rush for dollars. That means the Fed has to accommodate that. I believe the Fed has to put more dollar liquidity into the U.S. economy so that we don't see a continued plunge in prices. You know, the Great Depression was exacerbated greatly by very, very tight money where you had actually falling prices throughout the Great Depression. You don't want to see that happen. Now, the big question is then going forward, once we get out of this, when people can go out and buy things again, will we see inflation? I don't know. A lot of good economists say that they think inflation is on the horizon and higher interest rates. But you know, if you believe in markets, right now what the markets are telling us is that the 30-year bond, the 30-year U.S. Treasury bond is selling at a 1.2% interest rate. So why would anybody buy a 1.2% interest rate bond over 30 years if they thought inflation was going to run out of control? The market right now does not see inflation. It sees deflation. I am concerned about all of this debt we're taking on for sure. I think it's a dangerous thing to see so much government spending and government debt. And I never thought I'd see the day where Republicans and Democrats were borrowing this much. We might see a federal debt this year, in 1 year, of $5 trillion.
So time will tell on the inflation front. I want to remind everyone who's asking a question, please say your university and student group. We'd love to know where you attend and what you're involved with. Up next, we have a question from Addison Smith. He's a campus reform correspondent at Liberty University. Addison, go ahead.
Mr. Moore, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. So obviously we know as Americans and the rest of the world knows that China is responsible for this virus and for covering it up to save their own skin. What is the reality and feasibility of being able to pull, American manufacturing from China and bringing back billions of dollars of production, like pharmaceuticals, for example? China produces 85% of our pharmaceuticals, somewhere in that ballpark. So what is the feasibility of being able to bring production like that back to the United States? And since as an economy, we have to look at the secondary effects as well. Are there any negative consequences that could come with this?
Great question, Addison. Thanks for asking. By the way, where are you? What school are you at?
Liberty University.
Oh, good. Great school. I was supposed to actually come out there this spring, but of course, unfortunately, that was canceled. Hope to make it out there next year. It's a great school you're at. So China, let me just say this, that I believe in free trade. I think free trade unquestionably has been a major source of global expansion and massive reductions in the global poverty rate over the last 25 years. I don't think there's any question about this. Very few economists would disagree with that because of the expansion of global trade, Milton Friedman and Adam Smith taught us that, when if I trade with you, Addison, and I have something that you want and you want something I want, we're both made better off by trade. So I do believe in free trade, and I'm worried a little bit about whether globalization and the free trade movement is going to be stalled out because of what's happened. Now, that being said, I think China is a separate case. I think we are facing, I've been saying this, Donald Trump has been saying that much longer than I have, and I think it's the reason he won the election, frankly, is that he took this hard line with China. I believe that we are in a new Cold War with China. I believe China is an enemy, not a friend. I believe they're an adversary, and I believe that they have acted in a very devious way. They refused to come clean and to inform the world about the dangers of this virus, which we all know started in China. Now, I don't know if this was, Addison, I don't know if this was an error of omission or an error of commission. In other words, I don't know enough to know whether this was intentional. I don't think it was. I mean, some conspiracy theorists, and they may be right. Well, put it this way. If this was a conspiracy by the Chinese to destroy our economy, it worked pretty well, right? I mean, they have destroyed trillions of dollars of wealth in the United States that we will never recapture. You can never recapture the lost production that we've seen over the next couple of months and that we'll see over the next 6 months. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that this was intentional. I believe it was incompetence and deviousness by them. I think they wanted to cover it up because they didn't want to alert the world to how incompetent they are. And even if it was just an error of omission, they are responsible because they did not come clean, that they deceived people, not just in the United States, but around the world, in Italy and Japan and Taiwan and other countries. They infected millions of people with this disease. They've caused potentially hundreds of thousands of deaths. They should, in my opinion, pay a reparation payment to the United States. I just wrote a column on this. I know that's controversial. Some of my colleagues at Heritage Foundation and other places don't agree with me on this, and I respect people who may disagree. But I think that they should pay a reparation payment to the United States. Reparations are what you pay when a war is over. If you're sort of on the losing side and you caused harm to another country, they have caused harm. And then the question is, what if they won't pay? What if they refuse to pay? And I even said in my article, this is very controversial, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but I'll throw it out there. They own $1 trillion of our debt. So maybe we shouldn't repay them all that $1 trillion. Maybe we should say to them, you know what, you caused us grievous harm, and as a penalty for that, you're going to forgive some of that debt, whether you like to or not. I think China is the big loser here in the global economy as we go forward. I think American companies, Addison, are going to reconsider whether they want to depend on China in the global supply chain because they're not reliable. And so I think China is going to come out of this weakened. Some people think they're going to be strengthened because our economy has been so hobbled. I don't believe that. Now, our economy is hobbled. There's no question about it. But I just don't, I think in the medium term, I think China's going to pay a very high price for what they did.
All right, our next question is from Eric from Whittier College. What is most post-coronavirus? Economic boom or recession?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you just said.
What is likely to happen post-coronavirus? An economic boom or an economic recession?
It depends on what we do, right? That's the whole purpose of what I'm trying to relate to you. Policy matters, right? What we do over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks are going to determine the answer to that question. Whether we're certainly not going to have an economic boom. The question is whether we have a recession or a Great Depression. Whether we get out of this. This is the old. You've probably all heard of this. There's 3 types of recoveries, right? There's the V-shaped recovery. V-shaped recovery is a steep decline. It's the shape of a V, right? A very steep decline, and then once you hit the bottom, a very steep rise. That's what we'd like to see. That would be ideal here because we're going to see a very steep decline in our economy over the next 3 or 4 months. We want to boom out of this. The second kind of recovery is called the U-shaped recovery, where you go down quickly and then you stay down for 6 months, 9 months, or a year. And then finally, when you rebuild your economy, you go up. We can't afford that. We can't afford the American economy to be in a recession for 6 or 9 months, or the repercussions politically would be disastrous. So, the third type of recovery is what's called an L-shaped recovery, where you hit bottom and then you just have a very, very, very gradual recovery over time. That's what we had under Obama, where it was not a good recovery. It was the worst recovery from a recession that we had since the Great Depression. It was a pitiful recovery. That's why Donald Trump won, because middle-class people had seen no gains in their income over the past 12 years, counting the second term of Bush and the 8 years of Obama. So we need to hope for and work for a V-shaped recovery. We decline very quickly because that's in the cards. There's no stopping that. But then booming out of it by doing tax cuts, by doing deregulation, by limiting government spending. Government spending hurts the economy. It doesn't help it. And relying on private businesses and private companies and workers to get back on the job as quickly as possible.
All right, I'm being told I have an echo, so I'm going to try to work on that. But until then, let's do one more question here from Shalish Kumbat. Mr. Moore, what's the safe way to reopen? Should we cut restaurant entertainment capacity? What is the way to safe distance that's not different from a shutdown? Why would these businesses want to reopen with 80% capacity if their demand is?
So, you know what, sorry to say this, but you were kind of fading in and out. So I could only hear like every other word you were saying. You might have to try again.
Sure. So the question is, what is a safe way to reopen? Should we cut restaurant and entertainment capacity? How is that different from keeping social distance? Why would businesses want to reopen if their demand is cut by 80%?
Right. Oh, that's a great point. It's a great question. So, it doesn't really matter. Let's take an extreme case. Let's say that, Donald Trump and every governor said, okay, we're opening up tomorrow, right? Everything's open again. Well, do you think everybody's going to rush to the stores and rush to the restaurants and rush to the movie theaters and rush into the bowling alleys and rush back on the job? The answer, of course, is no. It's going to be a slow process. By the way, I happen to believe, again, I'm a libertarian, so I happen to believe that that people should be able to make up their own decisions here, right? If you don't want to go back to work, if you don't want to go to a restaurant, if you don't want to go to a bar, if you don't want to go out, period, you don't want to be around people, that's your God-given right. Nobody can force you to go out. Nobody can force you to go back on the job. Nobody can force you to go to a restaurant. But if people want to do that, and then there are millions of people who do, they should be able to. So people should be able to make up their own minds about how we deal with this, not having government rulers tell us what we can and can't do and boss us around. And that's essentially what we've seen by these governors and the mayors. So I think whoever asked that question has a good point. We need to make people feel confident that it is safe to go out, that when they see other people going out, and I noticed, by the way, in my backyard here, we have a big national park. It's the Great Falls National Park. And there's a bike trail right, within view of my window here. And I noticed, then the first couple of weeks of the lockdown, there'd be nobody outside. I mean, people were just afraid to go outside. Now we had a beautiful day today. There were hundreds, thousands of people on their bikes. Because people feel a little bit more confident as they see the curve bent down in terms of coronavirus. And now that people really understand this is an old person's disease, that somebody who's 20 years old really doesn't have to worry too much about coronavirus. So I think it is going to be a slow period of recovery. That's why I say the summer is going to be bad, because people aren't going to instantly go back to work, but they'll start to, and it'll become in ebbs and flows, and you'll start to see the economy recover as states open up. And let's hope that we can revive a lot of those businesses that have now gone almost 2 months without revenues, because the small businessman and woman, they are the spinal cord of the American economy. I hope every one of you listening to this show, there's no more noble pursuit, in my opinion, than other than maybe being in the military and fighting for our country, but to start a business and to employ people. And it just breaks my heart when I see politicians destroying small businesses and closing down their businesses, whether it's a barbershop or a little grocery store or a technology company. That is just heartbreaking. I'm going to end this on an optimistic viewpoint. I do think we're going to start to see, by the end of the summer, businesses up and running again. We're going to start to see a return to normalcy. We're going to get workers back on the job. People are going to feel confident about the direction of the economy. Trump said it very well. I rebuilt the economy once, and he did. We had, you look at the end of 2019, we had the best economy in 40 years, lowest unemployment rate, rising wages, big increases in economic growth, 7 million surplus jobs, things we'd never seen before in the history of this country. We were the envy of the world, thanks in no small part to the policies that Donald Trump put in place, emulating the great Ronald Reagan. Trump has said, I can do it again. And I think the American people agree with him. So thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And I can't wait till next year when I can come and actually visit some of your college campuses.
Mr. Moore, I think we've fixed the audio question. So if it's okay with you, we have a few more questions queued up.
All right, I can take 2 more.
Sure. Up next, Emily Bird from Louisiana State University with the Turning Point USA chapter there. Emily?
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. My question for you is, given our current economic state, looking back, do you think there could have been a better way to handle it without, or just flatten the curve without having to take such an economical hit?
Yes.
And if so, what do you propose?
Yes, absolutely. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, but I was never in favor, Emily, of shutting down the economy. I mean, Come on. Look, we knew from the start some things about this virus from what had happened in China and Korea and Japan and other countries that got hit with the virus before we did. We knew that this was an old person's disease. We knew that the demographics of the people who were hurt and got seriously ill or who died from this. We knew from Japan, from Korea, you can't really trust the data we were getting from China. But even in Italy, because remember, it hit Italy before it hit the United States, we knew that people who were dying were older people. We knew people, then we discovered, that people who had diabetes or people who had, heart disease or emphysema or other lung problems, that those people were very adversely affected. What we should have done, in my opinion, is quarantined the cities like New York. By the way, half of the people who've died, a little less than half, were in New York, and most of them were in New York City. So we should have isolated, the people in New York City. We should have, New Orleans was heavily hit, Chicago, Detroit, those places should have been sequestered because it was the crowding. These pandemics are urban diseases, right? Every pandemic that's ever hit the shores of this country or anywhere, they're a result of highly concentrated numbers of people living closely together. Why did we shut down Lincoln, Nebraska? Why did we shut down Des Moines? Why did we shut down areas in the country of Virginia? Why did we shut down Sheboygan, Wisconsin, places like that? We weren't smart about this. This is what government does. It comes in with a blunt instrument, and it just, instead of being smart and surgical about this, it just shut down everything. And I said, look, this is going to be catastrophic. It is going to cause so much damage, Emily, and we've made some very poor choices. And then we made a very poor choice, in my opinion, of spending $2 trillion. All we needed to do was let the normal unemployment insurance system work. And that meant people would get 60% of their paycheck if they got laid off. Look, I don't like to see anybody laid off. I mean, I think it's terrible, but it is what it is. People got laid off. They had enough money that they could take care of themselves till we got through this, but we started paying people 100% of their paycheck or more. That was crazy. Then we started saying to businesses, we're going to give you a loan. And by the way, if you don't ever, over the next 6 months or whatever it was, if you don't lay off any of your workers, that loan converts into a grant. In other words, you get to keep the money. You don't have to pay the loan back. So what do you think happened? I mean, this was eminently predictable. Healthy businesses that were never going to have to reduce their employment because half the businesses were still going to remain in business. Those businesses rushed to the front of the line to get free money. That's what everybody was calling it. Businessmen and women were calling it free money. How do we get some of that free money from Washington? And you know what that meant, Emily? That the businesses that really needed the money, those small businesses, the one on Main Street in downtown in a little town, a little store or a little shop or a dentist or whatever it might be, they couldn't get the money. And now those businesses may fail. So we've made so many mistakes here. I mean, that's the answer to your question. We've made so many mistakes. And as my buddy Arthur Laffer likes to say, anytime politicians act when they're drunk or in a time of crisis. They make really bad decisions. And we did make some bad decisions. Now, though, we can't. Now we have to stop making bad decisions, and we've got to start pivoting to making good decisions. And we know what the good decisions are: the free market, free enterprise, tax cuts, lower regulation, get the government out of the way and let our free enterprise system work. Folks, I'm checking out. It has been great to be with you. And as I said, I hope to visit some of your schools next year. And thank you to the Leadership Institute for hosting me.
Mr. Moore, thank you for joining us.
You too. Take care.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again tonight. Tomorrow, we have Ann Coulter in a similar digital town hall format, so be sure to register for that at leadershipinstitute.org. Again, we want to thank our donors for making all of our digital town halls and training webinars possible. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. And lastly, if you could all fill out that survey that we're putting in the chat box now. We do have a winner for you for the Uber Eats gift card. Caleb Gass, you are the winner of the Uber Eats gift card. So I'm sure someone will be in contact with you about sharing your information. So again, if you all could fill out that survey, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for watching this video. To watch our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe.